How many more games will the Tennessee Titans win, and can they make a playoff push? I'll give you my answer on today's edition of Locked On Titans.
You are Locked On Titans, your daily Tennessee Titans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Titans podcast. I am your host, Tyler Rowland. Titans fans, today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the second half of the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. On today's show, we're going to look at the rest of the Tennessee Titans schedule. I'm going to go through each game and tell you whether I think the Tennessee Titans will win or lose, and ultimately what their record at the end of the season will be. Also, could the Titans make a push for the playoffs? Probably not so fast, my friends. But with that being said, before we dive in, I do want to thank you for making the Locked On Titans podcast your first listen each and every day. Remember, Monday through Friday, Tennessee Titans content all year round, always for free. You're not going to beat that anywhere else. Make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's your team every day. Speaking of every day, tomorrow, crossover Thursday, we're going to start our preview of this big game against the Washington Commanders. Last show of the week, I'll have my game plan preview. And if you listen to last week's game plan preview, boy, were you ready for this matchup, including me predicting a Tennessee Titans upset. But of course, I'll go live after the game on Sunday to break down all of the action. Again, you're not going to get this kind of content anywhere else. Speaking of great content, my Will Levis film breakdown is up on the Tic Tac Titans film channel on YouTube. The link for that is down below in the description of this podcast. Make sure that you go check out that full breakdown. It's some great stuff from Will Levis this week. But speaking of that great stuff from Will Levis, is he going to be able to continue that going forward? And if he does, how many more wins will the Tennessee Titans get? Well, personally, for me, looking at the rest of the schedule, I think the Titans win 3 more games this year, which would bring their record to 6-11. So the Titans are 3-8 right now. Got 6 games left. I think that they can win half of them. Now, looking at this first game against Washington, and I think it's funny, sometimes I get comments that if I change my pick from Thursday to Friday show, people get all up in arms. Well, sometimes I change my mind, all right? And I'm allowed to do that. But right now, based on how I feel, I think the Washington Commanders do get this win. The Titans are on the road 2 weeks in a row. This was a big emotional win over the Houston Texans. Obviously, how important it was to Amy Adams-Strunk, the Titans owner, all of the players, the coaching staff talked about how important this was. This was a monster emotional win for the Titans. And oftentimes when you have a win like that, it sets you up to have a comeback down to earth when the emotions aren't quite as high. So to go on the road against the Houston Texans and then turn around and have to travel to Washington, D.C. and take on a Commanders team who has lost 3 games in a row, but they are going to be hungry for a victory. They're going to go all out at home to try to get a win. I just think that while the Titans have played improved football in recent weeks, I still think the Commanders are a good football team, and the mobility of Jaden Daniels and the explosive nature of the Washington Commanders offense, I think it's going to give Tennessee a little bit of trouble. So I think the Titans are going to lose this game against the Commanders right now. That's how I feel, but it's going to be a very, very close game, going to be a 1-score game, probably 3 or 4 points at maximum. And I think the Titans are going to score over 20 points in this game, and they're going to give themselves a good showing, and they're going to be proud of the effort that they put out on the field. But I think the Commanders at home may be just a little bit too much for the Tennessee Titans, and that'll kind of end any conversations that the Titans would have about, a wild card spot or anything like that, which I already think at this time is probably a little bit far-fetched. But after that, the Titans come home for 2 straight games. They take on the Jacksonville Jaguars on Sunday, December the 8th, and I think that is a win, and I think it's a decisive win for the Titans. One thing that I think really separates Brian Callahan's Tennessee Titans to me and makes me proud of this team compared to other teams that had similar records to the Tennessee Titans is that the Titans are playing hard. And I think the Jaguars are a team that's laying down and dying. They know that their coach is going to be fired. They know that there's going to be a ton of change. Trevor Lawrence is banged up, all of that. I do not think that the Tennessee Titans are losing at home to the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think the Titans can win that game 27-13, 27-17, something like that. I think the Titans will get a pretty decisive win against Jacksonville in Week 14. And then Week 15, the Cincinnati Bengals come into Tennessee. I think the Titans win that game. I think the Cincinnati Bengals are a better team than the Tennessee Titans. But does that always matter? I think the Texans are a better team than the Titans. But any given Sunday, baby, that's what football is all about. Listen, we just saw an emotional victory from the Tennessee Titans. This game against the Houston Texans meant more to the Titans organization than other teams that the Titans play. The ownership cares more. The building cares more. It's a divisional matchup. Will Levis had never beaten the Houston Texans before. Will Levis hadn't got a win all year. I think there were a lot of emotional factors that made the Tennessee Titans victory over the Houston Texans mean more and give more motivation to the football team. And I think that's exactly what this Cincinnati game is going to be for the Tennessee Titans. You have the connection between Brian Callahan and the organization. Not only that, but the Titans have had battles with the Cincinnati Bengals over the last couple of years, going back to that playoff loss and even the year before that, when the Titans went into Cincinnati and were up, and then Cincinnati came back and won. I was at that game. It was miserable. It was miserable. Let me tell you that. The wind in that game, terrible. So between the battles that these two teams, the Bengals and the Titans, have fought against each other in recent years, between the connection between Brian Callahan and Cincinnati, this is going to be one of those games where when the Tennessee Titans win against the Cincinnati Bengals, and look, I live pretty much in Bengals country. A lot of my friends are Bengals fans. A lot of the people around me in this area are Bengals fans, and I don't care. I'm saying it now. The Tennessee Titans are going to beat the Cincinnati Bengals. That is going to happen, and they're going to do it for their coach. This week, everybody was saying, hey, we won this one for Miss Amy. This meant more to our organization, and we did it for our owner. That game, we're going to be coming out of it where Jeffrey Simmons is saying, we had to win this one for Coach Callie. Now, I had somebody say to me online earlier this week that Brian Callahan got hired by the Titans. It's not like he got fired by the Bengals. It's not like it's like a revenge game or something like that. Folks, this is professional sports. People find motivation in all of the craziest places that you could ever imagine. Perceived slights, different things like that. And even if it's not a revenge game per se, out of negative emotion, the Titans players have plenty of revenge against Cincinnati that still lingers in their mind. And at the end of the day, they are going to want to win this one for their coach. And I think the Titans will do it. So in the next 3 weeks, I think the Tennessee Titans go 2-1. And I think we're thinking about this ball club in a totally different way. But how do they finish the last 3 games of the year? Big divisional matchups to end the season. We're going over that. And playoffs? Playoffs? I don't know about that, folks. Before we continue, do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Look, Prize Picks is the best way to play daily fantasy sports. That's why they have over 10 million members and billions in dollars of awarded winnings. On Prize Picks, all you got to do is pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. You can run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Again, you just look at the projection, like, for example, Justin Jefferson, 83.5 receiving yards. Patrick Mahomes, 250.5 passing yards. You just pick 2 to 6 players and say more or less. And we got a Thanksgiving special on Prize Picks. You get a free square. All you got to do is pick Tyreek Hill over a half a receiving yard for the projection to hit. And then if you get one other correct stat projection, you can win real cash. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. It's Prize Picks. Run your game. Today's episode is also brought to you by Skylight Frames. Look, guys, it's Christmas time. All right? Gift buying is hard. especially the people in your life. Like my parents, they have everything that they need. It's hard to buy stuff for my parents. That's why Skylight Frame is so great. It's easy to buy, and it can mean so much. So here's how Skylight Frame works. You download the Skylight Frame app to your phone, and you can literally upload thousands of photos from your phone directly to the Skylight Frame. It's a digital picture frame, and you can constantly update it as well. It takes less than 60 seconds to set up. It's going to have emotional value to your family. It's easy to purchase. And right now, as a special limited time offer for my listeners, you can get $20 off your purchase of the Skylight Frame when you go to skylightframe.com/NFL. That's skylightframe.com/NFL to get $20 off your purchase now at skylightframe.com. Again, get $20 off a Skylight Frame at skylightframe.com/NFL. Titans fans, let's continue today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast, talking about how many more wins this Tennessee Titans football team will get at the end of the season. I told you that I think the Titans are going to go 2-1 in the next 3 weeks of the schedule. They're going to lose the Commanders this week, beat the Jags, beat the Bengals in week 15. Now we're going to talk about the last 3 weeks of the schedule with 3 division games to finish things out. Before I get into it, do want to thank you again for making Locked On Titans your first listen. Make your second listen Locked On NFL, but also, I know, promo, I get it, but you guys got to check out my Will Levis film breakdown over on the Tic Tac Titans YouTube channel. The link for that YouTube channel is down in the description of this podcast. Just click on it and watch the video. All right. I need the support. I appreciate the support. And you're going to want to see these amazing throws that Will Levis made on tape that I described on yesterday's show. But with that being said, last 3 games of the year, all division games for the Titans. At Indianapolis, at Jacksonville, and home against the Houston Texans. Now, if things go real crazy for the Titans, let's say they win their next 3 games. Let's say that happens. And then they get to play the Colts, the Jags, and the Texans in week 18. I mean, if the Titans win their next 3 games, now we can have a conversation. Now we can have a conversation about things. And we'll have that conversation here in just a moment about the playoffs and what's realistic and what's not realistic. But right now, the way I see it, the Titans are going to lose this week to the Commanders, win their next 2 games. But then they go up against the division and at Indianapolis in week 16. Look, this sucks, and I know, because I don't want to get swept by the Indianapolis Colts. Nay, I don't want to. But I think it's going to be difficult for the Titans to beat the Colts at home in Indianapolis. I think both these teams, the Colts and the Titans, are similar level football teams. Now, the Colts have a better record than the Titans right now, but I think their last game was 20-17. Will Levis had 93 passing yards and a bum shoulder. That loss is probably on Brian Callahan. I'll be honest with you there. I think the Titans win that game if Mason Rudolph plays, and then Will Levis probably doesn't miss the next 3 games in a row. You know what I mean? Definitely had an impact on the season, and Brian Callahan deserves his blame for that, in my opinion. But I think that Indianapolis is very similar to the Tennessee Titans. I think that the Titans are going to struggle with some of their middle of the field options like they typically do. I think an improved Will Levis will help this game be higher scoring than 20-17, but I think the Colts find a way to pull it off at home against the Titans in week 16. But then after that, at Jacksonville, the Titans are sweeping the Jags this year. Now, for the folks who are real worried about the draft pick, that may not be the best thing to your ears. I get it. You're worried about the draft pick, and Jacksonville is probably going to have the number 1 pick in the draft. But at the end of the day, I want to sweep the Jags. I hate the Jags. I hate their fans. Not like personally speaking, but, from a sports fan perspective. I think the Tennessee Titans go into Jacksonville on December 29th in week 17, and they win that game. So for me, looking at it, that's a month worth of games. Jacksonville, Cincinnati, Indianapolis, and Jacksonville, where the Titans go 3-1. And I think that is important for this team going forward to kind of have that momentum to ride forward, to prove themselves, hey, we can play winning football on a consistent basis. For me, that's what I'm seeing. Now, is it impossible that the Titans will go in and beat the Indianapolis Colts? No, not at all. The Titans could absolutely go into that game and beat the Indianapolis Colts, but we have to have some realism here. We have to take a step back. I know that this win against the Houston Texans was incredibly exciting. I know it was wind in our sails. Like, you cannot deny, no matter who you are, that watching the Titans take down the Texans for all the reasons that we talked about throughout this week, it was awesome, man. And we needed it desperately. We needed some positivity. We needed something to be proud of, something to be excited about. So I'm not trying to poo-poo the excitement that everybody has right now, but the reality still is the Titans have some major, major weaknesses in this roster. The Titans aren't going to beat the Texans and then all of a sudden become one of the best teams in the NFL. Like, I just don't think that is a reality. So we have to be somewhat realistic about what this team can do down the stretch. And me having them at 500, 3-3 down the stretch, I think that is realistic. I think expecting the Titans to run the table and things like that. You know, we're going to talk about the possibilities of that here in just a moment. But, you know, I want to keep it somewhat realistic. So if you look at the last 6 games of the year, you have to have at least 2 losses for the Titans if you're going to be realistic. And maybe that's Washington this week, and maybe that's Houston in week 18. They get their revenge in Tennessee. I could absolutely see that. But you're playing 3 division games back-to-back, 2 of them on the road. And I talk about emotional wins. And one of the big reasons that I think the Titans are going to lose this week against Washington is because they got an emotional win against the Texans, and then they have to go on the road. Well, after they get an emotional win against the Cincinnati Bengals, getting it for Coach Callahan, then to go on the road and play a tough divisional game against a Colts team that's very similar in talent, if not just a little bit better. Again, I just think that's a difficult situation for the Titans. So that's why I'm going to have them losing that game against Indianapolis. At Jacksonville, though, I think the Titans are a much better team than the Jacksonville Jaguars. So I'm going to have the Tennessee Titans beating the Jaguars and sweeping the Jaguars this year. And hilariously enough, if you remember the AFC South preview episode that me and Tony Wiggins from Locked On Jags and Zach Hicks from Locked On Colts, and I think it was Cody Davis who did the Houston Texans. Cody has now moved on. He's covering the Detroit Pistons. Shout out to Cody. Miss you, but John Hickman and Big Sarge are doing a great job for Locked On Texans. But when we did this, I had Jacksonville finishing last in the division. I was not fooled. I did not believe in the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I still don't believe in the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I think the Titans sweep them. So I would have the Titans losing to the Colts in Week 16 on the road after an emotional win against the Bengals, winning against the Jaguars in Week 17 on the road in Jacksonville, and then coming back and the Texans getting their revenge at the end of the season. I'll have the Titans losing to the Texans in Week 18. Look, the Titans beat the Texans, but the Texans are still a good football team. I don't think they're as good as they were last year. I think the Super Bowl contenders that everybody was talking about the Houston Texans being, that's why I called them frauds after the Titans beat them, because they are not Super Bowl contenders. That's not a reality for the Houston Texans. But they're still a good football team, and they are going to want their revenge in a major way in Week 18. So for the last 6 games of the year, I have the Titans losing against the Commanders, winning against Jacksonville, winning against the Bengals, losing against the Colts, winning against Jacksonville again, and losing to Houston. That's 3-3 in the last 6 weeks of the year. The Titans go 6-11, a disappointing result from what we hoped for before the season. But I said the Titans, floor was 7 wins. For them to be 1 below that, I think that would be a great bounce back for the Titans. But could the Titans make the playoffs if things go well? It may not be in the way that you're thinking. Before we talk about it, do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Look, you could start the last third of the NFL season with a big-time deal on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So you get a hunch in the middle of a game. You can check out the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play and so much more on the same exact page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Again, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. And if you need to place that $5 bet, I think the Titans right now are plus 5.5 or plus 6.5 in Washington. I may not like them to win, but I like them to cover. So you could always do that for your $5 bet. But make sure that you go to FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Titans fans, let's continue and cap off today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast. We talked about the Titans record. I think they're going to go 3-3 the rest of the way, which would be a great finish to the season for the Titans, despite their tough start to the season. But this is kind of what I thought might happen. We talked before the season about the Titans getting off to a slow start with new pieces and a new coaching staff, and then Will Levis gets hurt, and the tough part of their schedule is the middle part of their schedule where they had to play the Vikings, and they had to play the Bills, and they had to play the Lions. Like, that's a tough – think about the stretch that the Titans are in right now, man. Like, think about it. Buffalo, Detroit, Chargers, Vikings, Texans, Commanders, who are better than we thought they were going to be. Like, that's a difficult stretch, a very, very difficult stretch of games for the Titans. So seeing them finish strong to the year would be big for the culture and for Brian Callahan going forward and the faith that this team has in themselves. So 3-3 is what I am predicting the rest of the way. Let me know what your prediction is for the Titans record in these last 6 games, either down in the chat on YouTube or hit me up on Twitter at TicTacTitans. Let me know what you think. But can the Titans make the playoffs? Listen, I kind of talked about it a second ago. I know that we are all very excited about the Titans' win over the Houston Texans. It was very exciting, really enjoyable. And I think the Titans are going to be a better football team in the second half of the season. So I don't think that it was entirely nonsense. I don't think it was just one lucky win and the Titans are going to go back to being terrible again. I think the Titans have turned a little bit of a corner here, and they're going to be a better football team down the stretch. But the hole that they've dug themselves is just a little too deep, in my opinion. So I don't think that it is realistic to say that the Titans could, make a playoff push or I just think that's a step too far in terms of the optimism trail. Like, it's one thing to be optimistic. I think it's a whole nother conversation to be so optimistic that you're talking about the playoffs. Like, I don't think that's realistic. But what I will do is I'll humor you. I will humor you, optimists out there, you optimists. I'm much more a pessimist, if I'm honest, a realist, I would call it. But I will humor you folks who think the Titans can make a playoff push. Look at the schedules of the Houston Texans and the Tennessee Titans. Think about it. The Titans don't even have to win out to make the playoffs. They don't even have to win out. And the Texans don't even have to lose out. The Texans don't have to lose all their games, and the Titans don't have to win all their games. What has to happen is the Texans have to only win one game going forward, and the Titans can only lose one game going forward, and they could still win the division. Now, a wild card is completely out of the question. If you're somebody talking about wild cards, that's not happening for the Titans. The AFC is way too good for the Titans to think about a wild card, but the division. So right now, the Titans are 1-1 in the division. Conceivably, the Titans could, let's say the Titans lose to the Washington Commanders. Let's say that. They lose, okay? But then they beat Jacksonville. They beat Cincinnati. They beat Indianapolis. They beat Jacksonville, and they beat Houston in Week 18. All right? So the Titans would go 5-1 the rest of the way. That would be 8-9 with a 5-1 division record. You look at Houston. All right? Look at Houston. Right now, they're 7-5, okay? If Houston were to, this is their schedule. At Jacksonville, they need to lose that game. They need to lose against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Then they play the Dolphins, and the Dolphins are playing better football than Houston right now. They could absolutely lose that game. Then they're at Kansas City, loss. Home against the Ravens, loss. Let's even say the Texans beat the Dolphins at home. Let's go with that. They lose to Jacksonville. Beat the Dolphins. They lose to Kansas City. They lose to the Ravens. And then they lose to the Titans in week 15. Their division record would be 3-3. Heck, they could beat the Jags. If they beat the Jaguars this week, this weekend, if they beat the Jags and then lose to the Dolphins, lose to the Chiefs, lose to the Ravens, and lose to the Titans, that means that their division record is 4-2, and the Titans' division record is 5-1, and both teams would be 8-9. Think about that. I mean, while I think it's a tad unrealistic, it is not impossible by any stretch of the imagination. So the Texans could even win a division game. And still, the Titans could catch them for the division. Again, the wild card is out of the question, folks. But the division, I'm just saying. Now, like I've said all episode, I think that's asking a bit too much. But I will at least acknowledge for my optimists out there that it is not impossible. It is not impossible. But with that being said, that is going to do it for today's episode. As a reminder, go watch my Will Levis film breakdown on the Tic Tac Titans YouTube channel. The link for the Tic Tac Titans YouTube channel, my film channel, is down below in the description of this episode. If you're watching on YouTube live right now, immediately go watch the Will Levis film breakdown. It's about 24 minutes. If you're listening to the podcast, cue it up on your lunch break. Watch it when you get home. Throw a thumbs up on the video. Throw a Titan up in the chat. Get subscribed. Stay subscribed. That's going to do it for me today, folks. As always, I am your host, Tyler Rowland, and this was Locked On Titans.